Hello everyone, welcome to the latest Handyman in the Field. I'm Dustin, and today we have a new topic. We've talked about pricing, we've talked about tools, we've talked about what makes a good handyman, but let's dive a little bit more into how to actually make some money. This time around, we're going to specifically talk about small jobs that actually make money. There's a lot of different jobs that you can do as a handyman, and obviously I've talked about this before about how as time progresses you want to niche down, get rid of certain things. When I first started, I started off with doing basically anything you can imagine a handyman doing. Landscaping, a lot of different things. Landscaping is the one that I know for a fact that I used to do a bunch of in the very beginning, and now I don't even touch it. Partially because my rate has gone up, and partially because I know that I'm too expensive once my rate goes up. So the big thing is, bigger jobs are not always the best jobs. There's plenty of handymen out there who end up making the adjustment over to remodeling and bigger projects and things like that. I do some of that, but it is not my primary situation. My primary situation is that I prefer to do smaller jobs. In an ideal world, if you could get to 2 to 3 different locations and do 2 to 3 hours at each location, you're making good money. You could make a lot of money in a day knowing what the best jobs are to bundle together. It's not obviously just about money. A lot of the smaller jobs would actually keep the business moving consistently and consistently have income coming in. The big jobs, even the bigger jobs that I have, trim repair, laying a room of flooring, things like that, those are sporadic. The stuff that is consistent is the small jobs. And the small jobs, they can add up to be a pretty significant amount of money and a lot less effort, to be honest. But as an owner-operator, and even as I move forward towards this new method of having some helpers work with me, small jobs are still great because they can bring in some quick, and I say quick and easy. It's not necessarily always quick and easy, but it's quicker than the big jobs, and it can be less stress than the bigger jobs. So what makes a small good job? It's not just the price. It is things that have straightforward scope. They're very easy and efficient to complete. There's not a lot of materials involved. You don't have to worry about getting the wrong thing. And it can fit into your schedule well. Some of it can be as simple as you have a customer who is motivated to get things done, but is also home during the day, so you can fit that into your schedule. And they have, a couple of small things. The biggest thing is if it's straightforward. We'll go through some examples here in a second, but the easiest things to do is when you have different service calls, some of the most efficient things that you can do as you have more experience are things like faucet replacements. They're very straightforward. When I have a faucet replacement, I have a specific box that I take with me. It has anything that I potentially might need in order to get that faucet off, the old faucet off and the new faucet on, and attached and connected and all of that. It has essentially anything you need for a drain assembly, because some of the faucets obviously come with new drain tailpipes and things like that. It has a set of supply lines. It has angle valves, shutoff valves, in order to swap them out if the ones you have there are currently seized up. Things like that are easy. Also, the things you can add on for something like that is supply lines. If a customer purchases their own faucet, there's nothing wrong with that, but they might not always have the supply lines. They might not always have the P-trap to replace with the correct drain assembly that they just bought. You should replace that. They're definitely not going to have the angle valves in case they're needed. Ceiling fans are almost always pretty straightforward. As long as there's a ceiling fan box present, there's pretty much no situation where you can't swap out a ceiling fan and put a new one up. I think the only time I've run into an issue with a ceiling fan is if there is a needed down rod and the customer doesn't have the down rod. But if that's the case, then you just have to get the down rod. But that, again, is pretty straightforward and pretty readily available at most hardware stores. Outlets. outlets and switches are, more specifically outlets. There's a ton of situations where outlets need to be replaced. GFCI outlets are a big one. They go bad over time. They go bad the more they trip. So if somebody's overloading them a lot, there's a high probability that they're going to get overloaded. That said, there's also a lot of other scenarios where outdoor outlets go out a lot. Those are obviously also GFCI. Those need to have proper covers and proper sealing in order to make sure that there's no water penetrating that electrical box and there's nothing happening to the outlet. Small repairs like, replacing a louvered door or replacing a bifold door. In most cases, you just have to get the new door, and you just have to get the new door on site and swapped out. In some cases, you don't have to replace the bottom bracket if there's nothing wrong with it. The top track I always replace because there's no reason not to. In most cases, it's just straightforward, get it up there. But those are the things that are like super quick. And typically, the more you do them, the faster you get. You do a lot of them, you know how to make the adjustments. Hinge adjustments are another one. Sometimes those can get a little bit tricky depending on the situation, but in most cases, if you've done this enough, you probably have enough experience where you can knock out something like that relatively quickly. Another thing is punch lists. I love punch lists. I love when customers have a list of things to do, especially if it's enough things to keep me occupied for the entire day, because that entire list is going to add up pretty quickly and keep me busy for the day at the same location. If you can stay on the same location and be, consistently busy at the same location throughout the day, that's perfect, because then you don't have to worry about extra gas money. You don't have to worry about any of that, which means more money in your pocket. The best part about punch lists is that a lot of my customers who have punch lists, they come back with another list in like a couple months. It always happens. But also, if you are able to complete a list of like 10 items, and that makes everything that they've been focusing on for the last, who knows, 6 months before they found you, if you can take care of all those things, they're going to remember you as the person who is able to take care of it. And the next thing that comes up, they're going to come back to you. So it's great for repeat customers. Another thing that I've been doing a lot of, if you've been listening to This Week in the Field, is move in, move out work. There's a variety, but it's almost always the same thing with punch lists. It's a punch list of different things to do. And in some cases, there's more or less to do than some people's personal punch lists, but there's typically a good chunk of stuff. If you can do it for property managers, that's another way of making it very efficient, because the property managers typically always have move in and move outs on a regular basis. So you can get that consistent work through them. The only thing to keep in mind with the move in, move out stuff is that sometimes that stuff is very timely. I had a customer recently who was looking to put their house on the market. They had a small punch list of a bunch of different items that need to get done, completed the items. He put the house on the market. One of the items that I took care of required a second trip back because something happened. And when I went back out there, it was a very simple thing, but again, he was concerned about it, but you did have to get back there right away because they could have a showing, as early as that same day. They never know when that's going to happen. So just keep that in mind. Move in is a little bit different, because people who are moving in typically have lists of stuff like pictures to be hung, mirrors, a lot of it's that kind of stuff. Drapery rods. If it's a new construction house, there's always people who are putting up drapery rods or blinds. Those are always real big things. But that's typical move-in stuff. There's also what I have found is in new construction homes, a lot of customers would like to change out the builder grade items. It doesn't always happen immediately after they purchase the house, but if you can get in the door and help them with the pictures when they get around to wanting to swap out the vanity lights, or wanting to change out the mirror with a nicer looking mirror, or change out the toilet with a better, a taller toilet, or a toilet with a bidet or anything like that, it gets your foot in the door. So just remember that. I said this earlier, repeat customers, property managers are a big deal, but repeat customers are the best because there's less unknowns. You've already been in their house. You've already seen how things operate. You've already experienced the communication level with the customer. So those are perfect scenarios where you can understand exactly how that customer works. Now, if you get a customer that does not communicate well or is a little bit more demanding and you can't handle that, you know that you can't continue to do work for them. So what you do is you just, politely say, I can't do that work anymore. But the repeat customers are the ones that are going to keep you busy. They're also going to be the best customers to refer you because they're probably going to tell their friends about you, which again leads to jobs that make money. It's also obviously a smoother workflow when you're there. There's trust already established. There's a understanding. They know how you operate. They're going to be a little bit less hovering over you when you're trying to do your work. That makes me more efficient. I personally can't stand when customers stand over me and watch what I'm doing. However, I know that I'm not telling them they can't, but it does make me less efficient because I have to not go as fast, not make any mistakes because they're standing there. If I make a mistake and they're not standing there, I just have to correct the mistake. But it makes you look bad if you make a mistake while they're standing there in front of you. Another thing you can do is you can have jobs that fit together. Now, this is a couple different things. Specifically, if you have different locations of jobs that are nearby, you can group those together to keep yourself from having to have a wide radius in a short time. I'm trying to get better about making sure that happens. A lot of times you have to have a lot of customers who are waiting to get work done in order to pair those perfect projects together, but it can happen. Let's say you've got one customer who has a faucet that needs to be repaired or replaced, and then you have another customer who has, they need a bathtub caulked, and then you have another customer who has, let's say they have caulking on their countertop. Well, that could be, pretty straightforward if you go through those three places because there's very little difference of materials. Obviously, there's a little bit less materials involved with the faucet than there is with the caulking because you obviously need to have the specific caulk that they need. But those three jobs can easily be stacked in one day and then you can become more efficient. It's all about making your schedule as efficient as possible, whether that be loading certain jobs at certain places or whether that be loading certain jobs locations at certain times to correspond with other ones. Always remember that less complexity equals less risk. That's not to say you can't have jobs that are more complex. I sometimes really enjoy those and sometimes I look forward to some of those, but there are times when you have a job and it's so complex that it can stress you out, and then that obviously is going to make you less efficient. The fewer surprise, the easier it's going to get and the more efficient you can be. I'm saying efficient, but also just keep in mind that efficiency equals more money in your pocket. If you're pricing jobs, like I've said, flat pricing jobs, you should be able to be making good money on the jobs that you're doing. If that's what's, if you get a faucet replacement and you're pricing like $250 for a faucet replacement and you got 3 of them in a day, that's $750, and you might only be working for half the day, to be honest. Some of it is you're going to have to travel, but you're not probably going to have a full day if you just have 3 faucet replacements, but you're going to get a good chunk of money for, that amount of time. Bigger jobs aren't always better. I said this earlier, but longer timelines create potential problems. There's more variables. There's more stress involved sometimes. But you still sometimes have to have some of those bigger jobs, especially because it's great when you've got plenty of small jobs that you can fit in, but that's not always the case. Sometimes you do have to have some of those bigger jobs in order to, hold you over while some of those smaller jobs come in. Quoting out one large job is going to be way more efficient than having to go potentially meet 3 new customers just to land 3 small jobs. I'm not going to sit here and say that big jobs don't have their pros and cons, because they do. But I think there's a healthy balance that a business has to have, and the small jobs typically is that's your bread and butter. That's what keeps work coming in. The biggest thing is experience is going to change what you value. As you are starting, you're going to chase the bigger jobs because of the money, especially if you haven't figured out how to price the correct way. That is going to become something that it could be at a detriment. There's a lot of businesses that they chase the big jobs so quickly that they end up faulting, because they chase too many big jobs and they can't afford to keep things going. I recently was listening to a podcast where they were talking about, there was a gentleman who was talking about how he started as a handyman, very quickly converted over to remodeling, got, within 2 years had like 8 employees and was, close to $1 million of revenue, but ended up having to shutter the business because he just couldn't keep everything flowing because of how much money was involved. It's better to build up your money than, dive head on just because you have a bunch of contracts that are going to get you a bunch of money. My mentality is to build what you can with what you have. Don't build it relying on the next job that you don't have yet. A lot of business is built on smaller jobs that make sense and keep things moving consistently. When over the summer, I get bigger jobs, especially exterior jobs, not building decks, but like staining decks or trim repair. Those projects can add up pretty quickly. And I try to, like this year, I've got helpers that are going to be working with me to help that stuff go a little bit smoother. But in the grand scheme of things, when it's just me, it's very easy to have days where it's small jobs. Today specifically, I had a couple of estimates this morning, and then I had a couple of really small jobs, and then I had another medium-sized job, a couple of small jobs in one location. And the day wrapped up with another estimate. There's a lot of estimates happening right now because it's just that time of the year where everybody wants to start doing stuff. That said, that I could get to the estimates because I have small jobs. If you have a big job, you can't just show up, 2 hours after the normal work day because you had to go do an estimate for a job that, you might not even be able to book out for a month. And then on top of that, the customer who's waiting to get the work done, they're waiting on you to even show up. That's not a good idea. And then if you have to skate out of there early to go do an estimate, again, that's not great. It's great when you have multiple employees and you can leave the employees in place and do what they need to do, but you can't really do that if if you're by yourself. So just keep that in mind. The biggest thing is not every good job is a big job. A lot of smaller jobs are what actually keep the schedule moving. Repeat customers and straightforward work go a long way, and efficiency matters more than most people think. I've said this, I will scream this from the top of the mountain. Efficiency is everything. The stuff that I put in my truck, the things that I have built over time, those are efficiencies. A lot of people call them systems. They are definitely systems, but I know that there's a lot more systems that I have to have in place in order to have people do other things for the business. But a lot of what I have is to make myself more efficient. I have tools that make myself more efficient, but the jobs and being able to do them relatively quickly makes me more efficient and ultimately makes more money for the business. So hopefully you guys got something out of this. I hope you guys are enjoying the videos. If, like I said earlier, if you haven't been checking out This Week in the Field and you want to know more about what I do week to week, as well as the pricing and obviously how I'm growing my personal business, check that out. That comes out on Mondays. These videos always come out on Thursday, diving deeper into business elements of how to run a business. With all that being said, I appreciate everybody who's been subscribing recently. We've jumped up like 30 people in the last month. That's awesome. Still obviously plenty of room to grow. So please share, like, subscribe. If you're not subscribed, leave a comment. Any of the comments that get posted, I do read those and I will respond to them if necessary. If you leave a question, I'll respond to those. I'm hoping at some point to have enough questions flowing in where I can do shorts as a response to your comments. So with all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Really appreciate all the support. This has been the Handyman in the Field. We'll see you guys next time.